That's me fading the music out. How cool is that? All right, there we go. How do I shut the background music off? Maybe just off like that? There we go. I guess that'll work. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to our Haven live stream. We haven't officially started yet. We're getting started here in just a few minutes, but I wanted to go ahead and bring on some of our friends so we can just kind of chit chat a little bit before everyone gets going. So I think our producer Stacy is going to start bringing folks in. There we go. Now you can see our sweet little graphic. Is it that? There we go. Okay. Excellent. All right. How's everyone doing? Everyone muted still, I think. Yeah. All right.
I'm good.
Excellent. Andy, I didn't even ask this before. Are you a Dallas native?
No, but I got here as soon as I could.
That's what they teach us to say when we're Texas immigrants, right?
That's funny.
Yeah, this actually almost exactly today is 10 years that we've been in Texas.
Oh.
That's about the same. Came here in 2010.
Yeah. Where were you before
like
Texas?
I was in Tennessee, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's where I did college and law school.
Sue and I were on either side of the very contentious Kansas-Missouri border growing up. We didn't know each other then, but yeah, fierce rivalries if you know your Civil War history. So,
Yep.
I actually found out. Sue, I don't know if I even told you this. I don't know, some amount of great's grandfather had his property burned down by Kansas farmer property burned down by Missouri people
Wow.
in the Civil War area or
Wow.
era. So yeah, good times, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Who we
and
got? We got
then-
Marilyn in the chat. What's up, Marilyn?
Hi,
Got
Marilyn.
Amanda, Lauren. Good to see y'all. Welcome, welcome.
JR, can I ask the meaning of the illustration?
Yeah, I'm gonna put it up there in a minute. The illustration with the pinata.
Yeah.
I just thought it looked cool.
Okay.
I don't know. It's an artist, and I was looking for something that kind of spoke about the idea of flourishing, but also had the kind of the wall behind it.
Mm.
Right.
So I was kind of just trying. I was going more for vibes, I think, than something super literal. But
Okay.
if I'm being totally honest, which I like to be, I guess with you especially, Caleb, I read this pretty sweet horror novel a little while ago called Pinata, that featured a haunted pinata, and that was kind of in the back of my mind too. Though that wasn't ever supposed to be something I shared. That was just like a little bonus for me. But
Cool.
I didn't know that pinatas started out as these 7-pointed stars.
Right. Right.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah,
I was thinking that was some kind of a commentary on COVID.
Mm.
now that you say that, I can totally see it. But no, that's
What caught my attention is that the one who's supposed to be taking care of the kid is also blindfolded, which is not usually the way it works. So it's
Seems dangerous.
So he's vaccine.
Oh, Evie's the one running the chat for the Russell household. Okay, I see that. Hi, Evie. Yeah, that's a New Mexican artist that I found. I really like her work.
nice.
So I think our images are covering up her name at the moment. Let me see if I can.
Yeah, something Fernandez. I remember.
Pull it up real quick so I can shout her out. Let's see here.
Juana Estrada Hernandez.
There we go. Yeah. So I was just kind of looking around for images that I thought would work with this, and that was one of the first ones I found, and it kind of stuck with me even as I was hunting around. So
Nice.
I went with her stuff. I really liked it. So, okay, well, it is 5 after. We're gonna go ahead and get started. So I just want to say to everyone, welcome. We're so glad that you are all here for this next edition of kind of crucial conversations. I've been unofficially calling them spicy conversations with our beacons, but where we like to do these in our congregation, where we take some of the ideas that we've been discussing in our sacred conversations on Sunday morning and bring in just some more space to hear from some people who are experts and have a little more expertise or wisdom with this kind of stuff. And so I want, in that vein, to introduce you to our panel that we have for tonight, because we're going to be talking about immigration. We are, I think, 5 weeks from the election at this point, and which is hard to believe, but immigration is one of the big topics that is shaping how people are thinking about the election. And way back at the beginning of September, when we started our month talking about immigration in our Sunday Sacred Conversations, I cited a statistic from a few years ago that 90% of evangelicals said in a recent study that what the Bible says about immigration does not shape their understanding of immigration policy. Anyway, which again, I found even the first time I ever read that statistic really surprising. But then when I started thinking about it more, I couldn't have told you a time when I was growing up, and I grew up, Southern Baptist and then worked in the Church of the Nazarene. I couldn't have told you a time I ever heard a sermon or a Sunday school lesson or anything about immigration. So it actually really started to make sense. And so we wanted to, with this series, we wanted to talk about
how we can think theologically about immigration and be responsible citizens, but also be faithful citizens. And so in that vein, I am very excited to introduce our panel tonight, who's going to help us think about that, not necessarily in a partisan way, because we don't want to ever be partisan here at Haven, but we do want to be political, because politics is how we all live together. And we understand, as we've been talking about for the last month, that a good bit of what that means for us as Christians is to live in peace and in harmony with the immigrant and the stranger among us. So in that vein, let me introduce our panel tonight. First up, we have Andy Morris. Andy is the Director of Immigration Legal Services for World Relief Texas. Andy, it is very exciting to have you tonight. Very excited to hear the perspective you're going to bring.
Yeah, glad to be here. Really excited.
And your wife is also here, Kesiah Morris, who was actually my introduction to World Relief Texas. Kesiah, you are the Advocacy coordinator for World Relief Texas. Can you tell us a little bit about what your responsibilities entail?
Yes, my responsibility for World Relief Texas is I mobilize pastors like Pastor JR to write op-eds, like articles about bipartisan immigration reform on biblical perspectives. And I work with a local media platform to release his articles, op-eds, and editorials. And I also go to churches and educate people how to look at immigration system in Texas, immigration situation in Texas in more aligned with biblical ways. And I also organize congressional meetings with pastors and faith leaders and community leaders to meet their U.S. congressmen and women and U.S. senators to tell them ministry stories for refugees and immigrants and their rights.
Awesome. And Andy, I realized I didn't even ask you to elaborate on being the coordinator for legal services. But what does that mean for you to be that person?
Yeah, we provide legal representation to World Relief clients and others who would wish to be World Relief clients. Up to this point, it's been primarily Afghans who fled after the fall of Kabul in 2021. We've been providing services such as helping them apply for their work permits, apply for their green cards, moving towards someday applying for citizenship. And we've since tried to expand our access to other populations with alternate funding streams. So really, we're just here to be that kind of final capstone service for people who come here and they need food, they need shelter. They get those things through resettlement agencies like World Relief, and then we step in and help them get their legal status.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to hear more about that as the night goes on. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about that. Next up, we have Caleb Gonzales. I've known Caleb for, I don't know, I quit counting Caleb, but a while now. And you're part of Haven, so our virtual Beacon folk, I think, will be especially familiar with you. But yeah, tell us a little bit about your background, especially as it pertains to immigration and Christianity.
Right. Well, my name is Caleb Gonzales. I am originally from Mexico. I am an architect, and I moved to the United States on a working visa. So my journey, to the United States has been what I would call a privileged journey in a way, right? But I have lived in San Antonio. I've gotten to live a little bit of the experience, and also, we do have in the family some family going through immigration stuff, so that we have had some experience with lawyers and kind of with the complexity of what the immigration system looks like. I don't get in terms of my views. I do believe that immigration that's at the core, and hospitality is at the core of a Christian, and I'm really happy to be part of the conversation.
I don't want to discount either the fact that you're an architect, so I have found you really good at exploring systems, and I think that's going to be really helpful for tonight as well. I always enjoy your insights in that regard. So yeah. And last but certainly not least, the one and only Sue Sweeney, who is my literal homie and my metaphorical homie. But Sue, tell us a little bit about your background. You're part of Haven as well, but you also have a background in education and history.
Yeah, thank you, JR. Yeah, I'm currently the secondary, so that means grades 6 through 12, social studies curriculum specialist in Richardson ISD. Richardson Independent School District, which is a school district here in the Dallas area. And I've been doing that for about 10 years. And then I taught high school for about 8 years. And Richardson ISD is a really interesting district. I've been working in it for 17 years. And it's the 6th most diverse district in Texas. And we have about 37,000 students. And I was just looking it up. We have almost 1,200 students that are refugees right now in our school district, and we just got 207 more kids, refugee students, after the school year started. But I write social studies curriculum for middle school history, and then high school history, geography, and economics and government.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you all so much for being here. We're very excited. And I do want to shout out one more time our producer, Stacy, who is in the background. You will not see her tonight, but she is moderating the chat. And when we get to the Q&A portion, she will be sending us your questions, putting them up on the screen so you can enjoy that as well. Now, we called our immigration series here at Haven Strange Attractors. And I promised that's a math term, I know, and I promised that would make sense at some point. And so I'm gonna introduce the math tonight. I swear I'm not gonna go very long, but I thought it would be very helpful as we try to make sense out of the format for the night, to talk a little bit about why I've been so captivated by this idea of strange attractors. So anyone who's seen Jurassic Park, one of the great films of all time, likely remembers Ian Malcolm, the chaotician. Right, he talked about chaos math, and his conviction was that you could not tame nature. Right, that life is too chaotic, and life finds a way is his popular. So I used him in the graphic that I think helps describe this. So there's our boy Ian Malcolm, but the mathematical concept of strange attractors is one that says in a complex system like weather or something like our immigration system, where it's really not possible to predict what's going to happen because the system is just too complex, there's too much data, there's too much chance, there are still some surprising patterns that happen, which is why we can, for instance, have weather apps on our phones that do a relatively good job of telling us that it will rain. It's why Ian Malcolm could be certain that even though all of the dinosaurs on the island were female, life would still find a way, right? It's even though they're chaotic and unpredictable, there's still some kind of underlying logic to it. And so here, I'm going to try to get just the graphic. Can I do that? What'll happen? Where did it go? Nope. Why is it? There we go. Okay, there. Now we can see the whole thing. Okay, so chaos math talks about two different kinds of things: initial conditions and parameters. Okay, and those are math terms, so I just use pouring Skittles into a bowl. Okay, if you take 500 bags of Skittles and you even make sure that all of the bags of Skittles have the exact same number of Skittles of each color in them, but then you like shake them up real good, right? And you pour them into a bowl 500 times, you'll get a completely different arrangement of the Skittles in the bowl. It doesn't matter how many times you do it over and over and over. You'll never be able to predict how the Skittles fill up the bowl. Okay, that's the chaos math. Okay, but as long as you're using the same bowl and you're dumping the same bag of Skittles, you know that all of those Skittles are going to end up in the bowl somewhere. So you may not be able to predict the exact places they end up, but you'll be able to predict these Skittles are going to end up in that bowl because that's what you're doing. That's sort of the idea of strange attractors, right? In a system on a large enough scale, things follow certain patterns. So the mathematician, as a friend of mine named Ali Michelatis that I was talking to about this, we were talking about immigration. What struck us about this is that when it comes to our immigration system, it is a complex system that is full of chaos. And all of our politicians keep sharing these stories about these, individual people that are either criminals or people who are suffering or something like that. And we can think of those as initial conditions. Who's coming to the border? We may not be able to predict. We may not be able to predict every single individual person, what country they're from, what their experiences are, anything like that. But what's not changing, what hasn't changed in at least I think 40 years in our country is the parameters, the legal framework that is welcoming, or in most cases not welcoming, immigrants into our country. And so because the parameters, because the bowl that we're this metaphor is getting gross, dumping people into, right? Because that's not changing, the system is not changing, right? And I think we can all be pretty sure that if we continue down the same path without making some serious changes, not to the individual conditions, not to the lives of the individual people, but to the system itself, changing the bowl, in other words, then nothing's really going to change. If that didn't make any sense to you, then just ignore me, because now we're going to talk to the experts. But again, what I hope you hear from that is that I think it's really important for us to think not just about how we can help individual people as they arrive at the border, though that is obviously super important. But I think we also need to be thinking systemically about how do we identify the problems with our immigration system, and how do we begin to propose some real solutions, and then maybe even, dare I say, hold our politicians accountable for implementing those solutions. Now, again, I know that's a big thing to do, but I hope that's where some of our conversation can happen tonight. And so I want to start with some of those parameters. I want to start with history, kind of how we got here, and then I want to kind of get into some of our experiences with it, and then move into some real hope that we have for change. So, all right, I'm going to take Dr. Malcolm away and go back to our people. And let's see. Is this the one where we're all the same? There we go. Oh, so much better. Thanks for accommodating me while I get used to the streaming platform, everyone. Okay, so first question, let's talk history. All right. The U.S. likes to say that we are a land of immigrants. But that phrase covers over a multitude of sinful attitudes toward immigrants. So what are some of the shifts in immigration policy that have happened in the U.S. that maybe you think we should know about? Anyone, and again, anyone that wants to jump in here, feel free to.
Well, I think Andy has better explanation on a detail level, but in a big picture wise, recently, well, maybe we can start from. So basically, have you all watched presidential debate, the recent ones? Right.
Yes.
So, it is true that both parties did not do anything significantly last 80 years. And
did you say 80?
80 years, there has been no significant great immigration reform. The first one, significant one, was like taking Europeans in to the United States. That was significant. But after that, there was no significant changes can accommodate what's coming in, who's coming in, and where are they. You know, all those mess that you just talked about didn't happen. But every election, specifically last in this one, both presidential candidates likes to use it as a decoy, as something to attract attention and draw their voters in. But even though they're elected, there's nothing much happening. It's just they're just talking about it. Sometimes visit border cities here and there. But it is true that no significant changes hasn't been happened. But this year, most significant one was bipartisan immigration legislation. It just happened. Majority of them, the writers and sponsors are from Republicans. So it was very conservative, asylum-seeker and chaos going on in the border cities. Basically put more beds in there and raise up some more regulations so that they can control how many people coming in and put them on hold not to come in. So it is not great in pro asylum seekers, but we did need a little more order than before. But Republican didn't do anything about it. They just kicked it off, even though it is the Republicans who wrote the bill. And before that, what did Democrats do? They didn't do much. They just talked about it. They are definitely party the pro-immigrant, but they talk about it. They don't want to touch that animal because they may lose some votes. So now, since then, in Texas-wide, Andy can explain more after this. Why don't you explain this in a Texas range, Andy? Like send it before the local police officer can catch anybody who's different race, anybody who looks Mexican, brown skin, non-white. They can catch them and then deport them if they don't have proper document. Can you explain a little bit more about that, Bill, Andy?
It's basically it was designed to allow law enforcement officers to, based on whatever mysterious criteria, which was vague enough that they have, to stop someone who looks like a possible illegal immigrant. You know, you can imagine how that's abused. That could be abused, and basically, you know, require them to show proof of their immigration status on the spot. And I believe it actually, it's been a little while. I think it was putting, gosh, you can't put me on the spot here, Kesiah.
So basically, it was like this lost. It's not going to happen right now. Supreme Court blocked it, but
Yeah.
it depends who's in power, who's in administration. This can totally possible.
Yeah,
street level type-
from a macro level, what it was doing was basically
macro level.
usurping federal authority and trying to give almost deportation power to state judges, and it was creating a very vague standard for who you could pull over, which was very constitutionally questionable. It was, however, blocked, so thankfully we don't have to live with it right now. But what it does show you is the political climate here in the state and the effect that state laws could potentially have, even though state laws are not, the state does not determine immigration policy and doesn't write immigration laws. That's the federal government's job. But still, states can have a very large impact on how immigration plays out in the state.
And Texas is the only state in this whole nation that who would like to make that happen, written into their law, Texas state law, about federal level issue to our state law issue. And another microscopic example along that line is DACA dreamers, undocumented kids who came with their parents when they were 3. Now they're all adults. They've been proven themselves, even though they don't have proper paper, they've been proven themselves as a community students, community college. They're working under the protection of Dreamer Act. Now, the other party, it happened under Obama era. It was executive order. So after he's gone, the other party doesn't want to do anything with it. Now they want to take it away from them, and they stop whole program. All the kids who came in after DACA program, they are just ghosts. But they keep proving themselves, and I have all the statistics that I'm going to share later after this webinar, that crime rate is significantly low because they're afraid to be caught. They do not want to do anything, mess with the law, especially here in Texas. So a lot of kids go to college, become a good teacher, good public health worker, but their life is not there, even though they are American. They're born and they came here when they were 3, and they grew up here. They go to church, they go to Catholic church. But even though how smart they are, a lot of people just keeping their status up by just studying as like student visa, as if they're foreigners. And a few months ago, Biden was really desperate to get more votes from pro-immigrant people. He released a presidential decision. What is it? What is the term? The
executive order.
Executive order that he's going to open up a green card, which is permanent legal status. The card is green. I have it too. To marry for undocumented people who marry to American citizens, to give them a better legal pathway so that they can become citizens by marriage, through marriage, in a better way. So they do here and there, they do things to make things easier and better for undocumented or immigrants who does not have any voice. Refugees are not undocumented. They are totally legal. They are here under the UNHCR's very high priority, very detailed safety guidelines. Government knows who they are. Government knows where they live. Government knows which school they go, which kids, like all this refugee kids that Sue was talking about, they all know where they are. But the problem is people who seeks asylum at the border and who came in under the like undocumented kids, undocumented parents who came in a long time ago in Texas.
Just a little bit to your question, JR, regarding our immigration system and its history. I wouldn't claim to be an expert on the development of the immigration system over the last 250-ish years, but what I can tell you is what the system's based around now, which is it primarily favors family connections with a smattering of public policy-based work-type visas, and then an assortment of work-based permanent residency pathways, and then an assortment of other things like what they call the green card lottery. But the system has historically been very subject to public opinion. There were quotas. They said we don't want any more Chinese people, or we don't want any more Italians, or whatever it might be. We're not exactly immune to that today. We have what's called the visa bulletin, where the Department of State lists. They have a certain limited number of visas under a bunch of different categories. These visas are what they call immigrant visas, which lets people stay here permanently. They have a limited number, and if you look, you'll see that they have different timelines for people from different countries based on, we're getting so many from India or Nigeria that we're going to only give them a certain number of the visas. And so in a sense, we're still doing quotas. We haven't really gotten away from that. But yeah, our system, it prioritizes especially family members of U.S. citizens, but it does value unifying families here in the United States. And then there are a number of public policy-based employment categories and a smattering of others.
Oh. JR, you're on mute.
Use the word lottery. It makes me think it's super easy to get a green card.
When was the last time you won the lottery, JR?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, obviously, all of us on the call are in Texas right now. Texas is one of the states that gets a lot of talk when it comes to immigration, partly because we have such a long border with Mexico, partly because we have such a strong political presence, I think, in the country. Several of our former governors have gone on to be presidents and things like that. So especially, I think, in light of westward expansion, the Texas War of Independence and all of that, the southern border has shifted again and again, disregarding the people who live there. And Sue, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how the permeability of the border has changed over the years. Because I've heard, I think this is true. Maybe you can tell me, that there was a time when the southern border was sort of just a nice idea, and people just sort of came and went, migrant farming and that sort of thing with really very little oversight, and that seems unimaginable at this point. So what can you tell us about sort of the evolution of border security, I guess?
Yeah, thank you, JR. I think I think sometimes when we think about immigration policy, and then we think about history, we kind of superimpose our ideas about immigration today on what people were doing 200 years ago and 250 years ago. And there's just, I mean, I know that people know this, but if you think about the map of the United States 250 years ago, I mean, all these 50 states weren't here yet, right? And so through westward expansion, areas became territories. Then over the years, territories became states. But there was quite a bit of conflict around who owned or had use of the land as white Americans specifically continued to move westward. But America has been regulating immigration for the last 248 plus years. And I think that what Andy was saying is so true, that over the years, as policies have maybe changed or not changed that much, it's always been really subject to public opinion. And I think that, Kesiah, you were talking about the complications with students and DACA, and I think that brings about an interest. It makes me think about the unintended consequences of a lot of these policies, too, that I think people don't always realize. That there's an expected outcome, and then there's things that actually happen to people that's not always considered. But specifically about the evolution of the border, for the early part of American history, while only really the United States went to about the Appalachian Mountains and a little bit past that, this whole western part of the United States, I wish I had a map behind me right here. I'm going to pretend that I do. But this whole region, well, in 1803, right, Thomas Jefferson made a little deal with the French, and we got the Louisiana Purchase. So this whole middle part was owned by France, and then Tommy J got a good deal on it for pennies an acre. So we sort of had that, but other European powers wanted that land too. And so Spain was a big contender, and also the British. So really, a big portion of what's now Mexico, and then Texas, and then on up even farther into the Southwest, was controlled by Spain. Later on, Mexico got its independence from Spain, and Mexico had control of most of what is Texas. And I can't remember exactly the borders, but extended way past Texas as well. So a lot of this land that we considered to be part of the United States was actually owned and populated by Spaniards and then Mexicans as well. And then, of course, Native American groups. It wasn't until, it wasn't the Texas part, and I'm not going to say it right, but I think it's Coahuila y Tejas, was kind of sparsely populated. And so there was a movement to settle those lands. And there were some policies from some people in the Mexican government, the empresarios and the land grants. And then we get Stephen F. Austin, and trying to bring, we call them white people, Anglo settlers, they say officially, I think, in our 7th grade Texas history curriculum, but to try to get them to come in and settle the area in order to kind of establish a location there, so as to prevent Spain from trying to recapture that land. So there was a time there where Mexicans and white Americans were really on the same side, united against Spain. And this whole time, people are moving around freely between this whole area. What really made the white people in the area of Texas upset was the issue of slavery. Mexico did not want slavery in their country, and the white Americans coming into immigrating into Texas and that part of Mexico. So that's interesting to think about. The white people were immigrating into what is now Texas. wanted slaves. They wanted to bring their slaves with them. And so that led eventually to the independence of Texas, the Republic of Texas, mainly surrounding the notion of slavery, and that white Americans wanted to maintain the institution of slavery. Eventually, though, as you may know, we kind of, because we live here now, Texas, the government of Texas kind of ran out of money, and they really needed the help of the United States. But that was a big issue, too, up in Washington, D.C., about whether or not to accept Texas as what they called a slave state. So I think that's important to know. And slavery, the issue of slavery is a big driver behind how states were entered into the Union. And I don't think the people really realize that.
So when did the border really start getting when did border control start becoming a thing? Was that like 60s, 70s? I mean, when do we have a sense of when the rhetoric around the border shifted from, people just are coming back and forth. A lot of these families go back older than the government of the United States existing, to like, we gotta build a wall and everything's super dangerous.
Yeah, I don't know. I probably should be able to, but I don't know if I can speak to that specifically, and maybe some other folks on the panel.
Yeah.
If I can kind of tell you
Mhm.
my experience, right? My father-in-law moved to the United States, San Antonio, on the 70s. And back then, they could pretty much cross the border without an issue, sometimes even without even papers. There were a lot of different passes through Eagle Pass or Laredo and stuff like that. So there was not such thing as control. Obviously, technology wasn't there either, right? So also that's something that has been evolved, in parallel to just the whole immigration system, right? So that's how it started. So they would be going back and forth without an issue, working here, going back. When I got married with my wife, we have been going and coming. It was around 20 years ago when Danielle was born, because that they started enforcing the passport piece. Like first you could come in with your license or whatever, right? So it was about 20 years ago they started asking for actual passport, but it was not necessarily a requirement. When Elise was born, so that was like 18 years ago, that's the last time that Arlene was able to cross without a passport. And things started getting more complicated. And then about 5 years ago, the license, the federal thing on the license, the yellow star, whatever that is, I forgot the name for that. That's when they started enforcing that also at a state level. So you were not able even to get a license in Texas. So I guess that kind of gives you a timeline on, just based on our experience, how complicated, or how it has become like more and more strict in terms. Now, as you walk that timeline, also technology has becoming more and more advanced to the point to where now, they just can't just passport and they know exactly when was the last time you crossed the border. They also got your plates. They got pretty much everything about you, and they still ask you questions, right? When was the last time you came? Like, do you need? I don't know. It's another thing.
So the current flood of refugees, asylum seekers, immigrants at the border, we've heard, right, are largely, these are not folks even just from Mexico trying to come up, though there are some of those. These are people from Central and South America, many of whom are fleeing political violence. And one of the things I think that has really staggered me is recognizing that the circumstances that many of these people are fleeing exist in large part because of U.S. action in Central and South America in the last 60, 80 years. And I wondered if any of you could speak to that a little bit. Just why do you think we don't hear about this? Why is this not part of the story? Why do we choose to start this story from when these folks decide to leave home and not with when their home became a place that they would want to leave in the first place?
Well, it's a complicated story. The U.S. has explicitly, over the course of its history, had a policy of considering the Western Hemisphere to be its sphere of influence. So you would see interventions in various countries over the decades. Nicaragua, Cuba, a number of different places. Overtly, if our maybe our troops were on the ground, or we were funding rebellious movements or toppling rulers, or in more subtle ways, economic tools to influence the country's trajectories and make sure they're staying in the fold, so to speak. And all these efforts over time, in the moment that the government kind of takes a political decision to step into some country in Central or America or the Caribbean or something like that, the moment they do that, at the time, it seems like a good idea if you're the sitting president, where you're concerned about national security and the spread of communism, whatever your reasons may be. You may think it's a great idea to make sure we have a friend in power, or the economy is working with us, but the long-term effects are the problem. And I'll pass the ball to someone else. Just wanted to throw that out there of kind of the historic view of the American government about the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah. Yeah, Andy, you mentioned the long-term effects, and that's definitely what we're dealing with now, in the sphere of influence. Around the early 1900s, as the United States got more established, they wanted to expand. Really, the United States wanted to engage in colonization, but actually in Texas, in schools, we're not allowed to call it American colonization, where you have to call it American expansionism, which sounds nicer, I guess. But really, we were trying to expand our influence and control lands in our hemisphere. And so you get, even through down to Panama and the Panama Canal and all those types of things that happen. But then later on, like you mentioned, with the Cold War, it was about, or maybe under the guise of trying to keep communism out of our hemisphere, because, communism and capitalism are two economic systems that can't really coexist in the world, the way that the leaders at the time were thinking about it. And so, in the name of protecting democracy and American ideas, the United States government intervened and maybe possibly engaged and maybe was the puppet master of lots of political regime changes. Ended up, we like to think of the bad guys being really clear, the good guys and the bad guys being very black and white. But, we also did the same thing with the Taliban in Afghanistan, in the name of trying to keep communism at bay. Ended up supporting and providing weapons and supplies to the Taliban, and that later, of course, became a problem. And so all those kinds of ways that we've inserted ourselves and involved ourselves in the governments of South America, we've often told people we were siding with the bad guys, and maybe the bad guys were kind of looking at the two big world powers and thinking, well, who's going to help me out? We didn't really care about democracy or communism or capitalism or either any of those things. And so once they got what they wanted from their chosen world leaders, they, continued on with whatever they wanted to do. I think it's also important to remember that legacy of colonialism in Latin America and South America, you have a system where the Spanish government came in and set up really oppressive governments where people were not empowered and there wasn't any democratic system in place. And then during a lot of those independence movements, when Spain suddenly left, there was a power vacuum, and the Spanish government did not invest in developing any of those institutions that need to be in place for democracy to work, and often left people very poor and destitute. And so that's how you get a lot of corruption too, because they didn't leave good systems in place for people to govern themselves. They came in and took all the good stuff and then left.
Sounds like it has happened somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I wonder if some of you who have who have been through the immigration process, either yourself or have a partner or maybe a friend who have gone through it, what do you wish, especially as you hear the rhetoric, either from the debate stage or maybe you hear how people are talking about it or see it on social media or whatever, what do you wish people knew that it seems like people don't know?
I've been trying to meditate about that question. I don't really know. There's something. I think many times what you find is that they know even more than you do. I've been traveling through Mexico and Central America and Latin America, and this, like, I've been amazed to see how much they know about. No, if I only arrive this way, all I need to do is say this, and I'll be there. It's like they know some of the stuff in terms of how the system works. What they probably don't know, and I don't even know, like, if they don't know because they have family working here. They know how hard it is. The capital. The cost of living. The discrimination, the lack of rights. They know a lot of that, and they still makes a better narrative to where they are, right? So that's kind of it's a very intrinsic. It's a very the words leave my, like, very complex and complicated system that we're working. As you were talking, or they were talking about the how, and this is very known, how the United States has been destabilizing elections and political systems, in many places historically for years. But as I was hearing that, as I was listening, I wonder if this is, and I don't know if this we want to take the conversation, but it's really an immigration conversation, but it's really a power dynamic. I hear the word communism, and I'm telling you, like, it's just crazy how that word is demonized here in the United States, and a lot of things are being done by using that word. And a lot of people that I interact with that use it, I ask what communism is. They can even give me a description. So it is just a label that is being used to sometimes, so at the end of the day, I don't think it's communism. I would say, capitalism, it's not, I guess the benefit of is more driven by profit and more than a political idea. It's more like a economical idea or economy idea, right? And this is why people gravitate towards that, but they don't understand it either. So in my mind, is it really capitalism versus socialism, or is it power and money versus whatever it is? You put it wherever you want it. And how does that inform then the political, my ideal to move into, a country or not, right? Because it's people, even though they will face discrimination, living 10 people in one, like, 12 by 12 room or whatever, that is even better than where they are, right? So it's complicated. So I'm kind of circling around, but at the end of the day is how do we see this issue, which in my mind, I'm just kind of bring it to a point to where I can pass the mic, but I think it's more a conversation about power, entitlement, and oppression versus opportunity or caring for others, and how can we really figure out a way to navigate the conversation, understanding this as those two opposites versus a political thing or an idea or a wall or no wall. I think that to me just goes to the most fundamental questions. And I think that as a Christians, we should really try to simplify it a little bit and remove the labels and see, is this something I'm called to do or not? Yeah, I mean, I hope this says something.
No, thanks for that. What about some of the rest of you? Things you wish people knew that you just don't hear people, seeming like they know?
This is what I witnessed as an advocacy coordinator for Texas. I came in here as a student, and I didn't know this is actually happening in America recent days. So no one came in here because they want to come here. The clients that I serve, the human right that I work for, they rather stay their home country, making good money for their reasonable living. They don't want to leave their families and relatives and friends. They don't want to leave their business behind because they don't know how to speak English. They didn't go to school here. They got no friends here. I'm talking about people who crossing the border, and American legal immigration system cannot recognize their reason to apply to asylum case because it's majority of them economic reason or domestic violence reason, like nation violence, not home violence. And but it's their legal right to come in as seeking asylum. That is protected. But after that, it is not protected here in America. And 20% of 100% who apply to asylum case can get their asylum cases done. Where are the 80 of them? And it takes 10 years, at least 2 years, depending on which country you're from 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years. Now you're living here illegally, making money illegally to support your family, and then where do you go? There is no other countries on this earth who has asylum seeker category. This is the country who has the protection, but it's halfway done. It's failing everybody. American citizens and who are crossing the border or asylum seekers. So I think they would rather stay home, be with their comfortable environment, but it's just their country's not working.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's speaking to motivations. The news that we see today, I mean, getting to the idea of, what do we want people to know in response to all the sensationalist news stories and the political rhetoric, and the broad kind of thoughts of the immigration system. What do we want people to know? And I would tag on to what Kesiah's saying here is that motivation, people are getting the motivation question all wrong. The people who are crossing the border, away from ports of entry, or at ports of entry, more and more these days are not coming to sell drugs, and they're not coming to get rich. They're coming because they're desperate. And here's the kicker: under our laws, they have a legal right to do so. They have a legal right to present themselves to authorities when they cross and to request asylum for protection. So those people that everyone thinks are just pouring across the border as an army of usurpers to steal the country away from them, that's not what's happening at all. Most of the drugs that are coming across the border are coming through ports of entry carried by American citizens. And furthermore, the reason we have so many illegal immigrants now is exactly what Kesiah was saying, is because our system is so broken, so twisted, that people who do their best to come legally end up having no choice but to remain illegally. So the answer, what I would like people to know is, hold Congress accountable for once. Don't bow to the rhetoric of, one party's letting everyone in and the other party's keeping everyone out. Use your judgment. I'm not going to take a political stance here. What I am going to say is, don't let Congress punt on this issue anymore. if one party is the one that's saying we want to pass immigration reform, that party's on the right track. If there's a bipartisan reform bill in Congress, don't support the candidate or party who is trying to sink it for the sake of political gain. Immigration is a very complex issue. Immigrants who come here, if they're not protected by labor laws, they are a depression on wages across the country. And so this bleeds into labor, it bleeds into economics. It touches all aspects of our lives, and that's why it's such a big deal. Even for people who may never have met an immigrant in their lives, they still care very deeply because they think that it's taking jobs away and jobs are being shipped overseas. We need to fight for Congress to take meaningful action on fixing our system so that people who are coming would feel like they have a real chance for their families if they do it the right way. And I just want to emphasize that we need to stop portraying the people who are coming across the border as invaders, when all I would ask is that people apply this simple rule. If the roles were reversed and America was a failed state and we were in civil war and you're desperate to get your family out of American soil in order to save your lives, and you give up everything to escape just to save the lives of your family, and you cross the border into Mexico, which is a peaceful country in this example, how would you want to be treated? How would you want to be treated? I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I do want to move to talking. We're going to get to our Q&A in just a minute. So if anyone watching has some questions, you can start putting them in the chat right now, and Stacey will have them ready for us. But as we're moving that direction, I do want to talk about change. Andy, you already mentioned holding Congress accountable. We're 5 weeks out from the election. And again, who knows if we're going to get another presidential debate? We're definitely going to get a vice presidential debate. We're hearing some of our federal candidates talk about it, which you mentioned is important because constitutionally, it's the federal government's job to enforce borders. For many of us, we live in a border state, and so we do have state officials who are also passing laws. Sue, you actually mentioned the textbook stuff, right? Like even how the story is being told, like that's a state decision. So at a number of different levels, this next election will impact immigration in some way. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of what we should be looking for or listening for in terms of when candidates are talking about this issue? Or do you know of any legislation that is coming down the pike that we should be paying attention? If you can't tell, I know nothing about any of this, right? So it's like, just help me out. If I'm sitting here saying, what do we do other than just feel lost, right? Like what advice would you have for us?
Yeah, well, first I would tell people to just watch for, look out for candidates that offer real solutions, not just the general, we're going to deport everybody and build the wall, but or we're going to let everybody in. Look for candidates that have specific solutions that they're offering. My pet issue of reform is the immigration judge system. Right now, our immigration judges are not independent. They are under the supervision of the Department of Justice. Therefore, when the Attorney General changes, the rules that the immigration judges are following change. And what you get is an immigration judge system that sways with the wind as presidential administrations enter and exit. And if I could show you this document I have that shows you the rate at which every immigration judge in the country is listed individually, and it tells you their rate of denial of asylum applications. And it's very depressing. So I would reform the immigration judicial system, make it independent, so that it's like all the other court systems in the country, where they're not swinging with the political winds. And I would say that anyone who says they're going to deport everybody has no concept of economics at all. You should go look up at how America gets its food and then rethink your position on deporting all of the undocumented immigrants. A reasonable pathway to legal status is the only answer there. But I'm going to pass it to Kesiah because she might be able to give you like a couple of Congress people who are actually working on something.
Right.
But my last thing is I want to also caution us that, you know, it's really hard to make a perfect immigration reform proposal. You know, the Biden administration, in response to Congress's inaction, put in place a new system of how to handle asylum seekers at the border, which is very onerous, very bad for legitimate asylum seekers. And I won't go into detail as to why that is, but it's like we said earlier, it's a response to public opinion and a sense of emergency. So anyway, I'm going to pass it to Kesiah for updates about what's actually taking place.
So two levels of participation that we can do. There's a bipartisan legislation happening right now. Actually, our Texas Congressman Luttrell, he's Republican, and Democrat from Florida, his name is Suzzi. He's Italian, second generation. They're both working on the bipartisan immigration reform legislation right now. Looks really great. And he's asking everybody, talk to your faith leaders, you know, to get to know this so that they can call their congressman in your district. So citizen advocacy is really simple. This is another story that I should guide you to how to do it online or any way I can help you with. You can email them, call them. But best one is you can not like generated auto email, but like sometimes I organize a meeting with John Cornyn's office, you know, and I ask maybe JR or any pastors, anybody who wants to be in the meeting, you can be online. And actually that's their job to sit down with you and listen to what you have to say. That's their job, deputy chief's job. So tell them what you think. Other than that, advocacy level, other than that, talk to your friends. Like, hey, what do you think about immigration issue this year? You know, and tell them what you heard. And JR can send you any material that World Relief created. So much interesting information in it. Read it for fun and share it for fun with your friends and create a discussion.
I do think that's really interesting. I mean, when I really sat down and started to try to just in my head respond to some of the things that I thought were probably not true about illegal immigration or undocumented immigration, like that it's creating all this crime, I was like, I don't think that's right. But I realized I didn't have any resources, right? I just had my feeling, and that I thought I had heard that somewhere from someone, you know. And so like the process of beginning to get some of that data to be able to share with folks, that was really important. And yeah, World Relief Texas has been a huge source for that. Y'all have done some webinars and provided all kinds of stuff, some things that you sent that we'll provide also to folks after this as well. I'm really excited about what like it. I don't want to trivialize the election, so don't hear this next question as that. Voting is super important. I hope everyone's registered. Go vote. Yes. Also, elections are once every 4 years, or once every 2 years if you're doing some other like state elections and stuff like that. What else can and should we be doing between those times to be good advocates, good allies, good hosts?
Yes, that's such a great question. Between those times, reach out to your state representative, your politician in your district. That's their job to listen to you. It's everybody's job to listen to you about your concern, refugees or undocumented in your community. If you don't know any refugee friends, if you don't know any asylum seekers, World Relief clients are 100% refugee or refugee-like status people. You can go pick them up from the airport, help them to Texas and Dallas is the hub for refugee people. They coming in and resettle here for their life. I can connect y'all with our church mobilizer in Dallas. She can help you. What's a tangible way you can help refugees? The refugee-like status people coming in and resettle here. For asylum seekers, there's an organization called Dash Network in Fort Worth. They only serve people who cross the border, who does not have a proper document. If you want to work with them, I can also connect assistant director, executive director to you so that you can tangibly help them or donate. I really do think so. This organization, the Dash Network, is not under government funding. World Relief is under 100% government funding because we're serving refugees, but not Dash. So I know they're always in need of help if you specifically talking about asylum seekers.
That's great. And I'll say too, I was involved when I was in grad school. I was in Columbia, Missouri, which is not a major city in Missouri. It's a college town, but it's not a major city. And I was involved with the refugee and immigration services there. So I know we have folks who are part of Haven, and probably a lot of folks who are not a part of Haven who are watching this, after the fact, who maybe don't live in a metroplex like Dallas Fort Worth, right? But I would just encourage you'd be surprised the number of refugees and asylum seekers and undocumented folks that are probably living very close to you. And yeah, it probably will not take too many clicks of the Google to find some organizations that are doing some things where you can get tangibly involved. Sue, I'm curious, again, you work in one of the most diverse school districts in the country. And so you see a lot of this stuff as well. Like, do you have a sense of what we can be doing about, you mentioned again, the textbook editing that has been going on, that's again been in the news for the last couple of years, but like, if people care about that, like, where is that, like, showing up to a school board meeting? Is that talking to state representatives? Like, how do people begin to kind of advocate for justice, even in how we're teaching our kids about this stuff?
Yeah. So in Texas, we have our own state standards for what students are supposed to learn K-12. And that's our curriculum, and it's called the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. So whether or not you're a second grader or an eighth grader in McAllen, Texas, down by the border, or you're in North Dallas or Highland Park, unless you go to a private school, all kids in Texas are supposed to, by law, learn the same curriculum, the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. Those standards are determined by a slightly democratic process. I mean, it's not perfect. I've been able to be on some of the committees for social studies, but it's the State Board of Education. And so every area has a State Board of Education member that's elected, and they're also super accessible. You can find out, I think you can go to Who Represents Me. I think if you Google that and you put in your address, you'll be able to see all of your representatives, and then it'll give you a link to email them and their phone numbers. And so you can email your State Board of Education representative. You can call them. They'll come sit down and get coffee with you and talk to you. They're super accessible. The different content.
Can I hop in there real quick?
Yes.
How many people a month do you think do that with them?
Not as many as you would think, actually, because I know,
right?
Yeah, I know. I've been able to sit down with mine, and she just came over to my office.
I think we have this idea that these people are like constantly inundated with concerned citizens, and my limited experience with these folks is that's not the case. Kesiah, you seem to be nodding in agreement that very few people exercise the privilege that we have of access to these folks, which also, I don't know if we've all heard the phrase, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? Like, when you are the person who is speaking up, and there's, 5 people that visited him that week, your voice is going to count for a lot. So anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I keep going with what you were saying, but I just want to encourage folks, like, 2 of you now have said, or I think 3 of you, Andy, Kesiah, and Sue, have all said, contact these folks, reach out, try to have a conversation. yeah, it's not as crazy as, it's not like you're trying to get Clooney on the phone, right?
Yeah.
Like he's way busier than your state curriculum person.
Yeah. So, and then there's the Texas Education Agency too, but it's the State Board of Education, and their all their agendas are posted online. Their meetings are recorded. You can watch them. You can watch any legislative committee meeting online if you're so inclined. But a lot of organizations also do really good summaries on them too, and you can go back and get some info. But if you follow the State Board of Education, then you can kind of tell when the standards are being revised. And so I think particularly with social studies was being revised a couple years ago, and then there was a lot of political issues in the State Board of Education. Actually, what had happened is some people in the legislature threatened to disband the State Board of Education if they continued discussing social studies standards. So they said, we're going to put this on hold. And they have the power to do that, apparently. So, but, you can go to public hearings. I've testified before at public hearings at the State Board of Education. You can do it virtually. You don't have to go all the way down to Austin usually. And so there's lots of opportunities to have your voice heard, but also being part of your parent-teacher association. And really, if you're a parent and you have school-age children and you have the time, really working with your PTAs to try to bring in more parents that don't look like you or speak the same language with you. I think that's a big challenge. Our schools are a lot more diverse than people realize. I mean, definitely some parts of town they're not, but the way the school systems are set up now, it's gotten a little bit better with that. And so we have a lot of parents who want to be involved, but for various reasons feel very marginalized. And we also do a lot of work with teachers too. If you're in education, you know that we do a lot to make sure that our content that we teach is accessible to all students and comprehensible to all students, no matter what language they speak. So continuing to work on those types of strategies and help your students build their English language proficiency, and then also build their proficiency in their home language too. Ideally, we want students to graduate from our K-12 system being able to speak and read and write in English at high levels, and Pashto and Arabic and Spanish. Because that just means we have smarter, better people. It's a good.
Which seems like a win, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I want to offer up some space for folks who are tuning in to ask some questions. So let's see here. It looks like we might have. Okay, yeah. So we have. This is from Janelle Torres. She says, are there any, here, I'm going to see if yeah, look at this. Oh, Stacy did it. You beat me to it, Stacy. Sorry. Are there any faith-based organizations working across multiple border states to aid immigrants, refugees, and push for reform?
Yes, there are a lot of them. Every organization has its own main task to take care of. Faith-based organizations, usually it's attached to certain major denomination in that area, like El Paso Baptist Association, that has their own the housing system, and help them to resettle for a temporary time. All the border states has it. But right now, the closest one is Catholic Charity, World Relief, and Dash Network. And there's lots of other resettlement agencies. But if you're talking about border asylum seekers, there is only like a few.
Okay. So you're saying maybe look in some of those towns, look for some of those organizations. Awesome.
It's hard to find them. It's better for me to refer those organizations to you so that you can be connected with that person.
Yeah, that makes sense. Janelle is a pastor out in, putting me on the spot, Janelle, California, I think. I say that. For some reason, I almost said Oregon. She'll text me later and blow me up for not knowing that off the top of my head. Okay, so in California, I knew that all along. I was just kidding. Okay, so this is from Jeremy Williams. What, in your opinion, is right or wrong regarding immigration? What are the problems regarding people overstaying their visa? Is it a problem that people come to the border for asylum? I understand the system is overwhelmed, but is there a way for it not to be? Are there big, scary issues that people should be focused on regarding the border? Andy's grinning. It looks like you have thoughts. Not to put you on the spot.
Well, you did. Congratulations. That's a big question, a big series of questions, Jeremy. What is right or wrong regarding immigration? If you're here and you're a believer, I would first, look to the heart of God about what's right or wrong with immigration. How do we see people who look different than us, speak a different language, like different foods? Do we see them still in the image of God or not? Now, does that mean, to use one party's talking point, does that mean we need to open borders, just let everyone do whatever they want? Well, no. But I think the Bible is pretty clear about how to treat immigrants. I think and foreigners. I think Jesus' story of the Good Samaritan tells a real object lesson and how to, we're surprised at who helps who in that story. I think if you talk to immigrants and you see, their personal motivations for coming, just talk to them individually, kind of take a look at their personal motivations, and you can kind of, they may have very, big opinions on other immigrants that you may be surprised about, but ask about their personal story, and get a sense of why they came here, what they went through. And hopefully that'll give you some perspective on immigration, and you can answer that question better for yourself. I won't try to answer all of these, just me, but is it a problem that people come to the border for asylum? I would say it depends on what you mean by is it a problem. Is it a violation of the law? No. Is it good public policy to have that law in place that lets them claim asylum at the border? Well, that's a good question. I would refer you back to that example of what would you want if you were an asylum seeker yourself? How would you want to be treated? Would you want to be turned away at the border? How to make the system not overwhelmed? Well, you need to first redirect some of the billions upon billions upon billions that are being funneled into our military industrial complex into hiring more immigration officers who can process applications faster, to strengthening the Border Patrol and their ability to process the ports of entry in an efficient and appropriate manner. I would say you need to have better labor laws in place so that wages aren't depressed so low by different businesses allowed to almost have slave labor in the country because they're living in the shadows. They're not protected. That would raise wages across the country, and that would benefit the country as a whole, to be able to better incorporate people who want to come here. Are there big, scary issues that people should focus on regarding the border? I mean, fentanyl is real, but that's coming through ports of entry, and U.S. citizens are carrying it by and large. So, there are, of course, big, scary issues in the world, but they're not always the way you think of them to be.
I want to hop in regarding that first point you made about, right or wrong regarding immigration and people overstaying their visas and that stuff, right? It's obviously that is like a breaking of a law, and we have, everyone's favorite verse to quote about laws is Romans 13, which is, do what the government says. But I think what we ignore is that, especially in the prophets, God is usually angrier at the system that produces the illegal behavior than God is at the individuals who are breaking these unjust laws. And I would cite everyone's favorite apocryphal biblical text, the Disney movie Aladdin, right, where he sings this whole song at the beginning of the movie about how he has to steal because of the economic conditions of the city that he lives in, right? And he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to be a criminal. He just doesn't really have a. He doesn't really have a lot of other options. And I think this is it, right? If someone is angry about people overstaying their visas because it's illegal, I'm willing to entertain that conversation if they are at minimum equally angry about how hard it is to do it the right way, quote unquote. Right? If they at least have the same amount of anger directed towards the system that is making it easier for someone to overstay their visa than to do it legally, then I'm open to a conversation. I think when someone is purely directing their ire at someone who is trying to figure out a way to survive and they're trapped in a system that is criminalizing them and they don't reserve any of their anger for the system itself, I think we have a different problem. Again, at Haven, one of the things we talk about is in our sacred conversations, if we disagree, we try to get down below the disagreement to where our values are clashing. And that's a case where I think my values are clashing with this person's values, right? We're not really disagreeing about immigration policy. Like, we have a deeper disagreement about something below that. And I don't know, until we get down to that, I don't know that we can really go further. So, for me, I think that's what I look at with that first part of Jeremy's question. Sure, we can talk about how it's against the law, but let's also talk about the laws and how Kesiah, I like dry heaved a little bit when you said we haven't had significant immigration reform in 80 years. Like, that's bananas. I think about do we have cars 80 years ago? The world has changed so much in 80 years, and yet our immigration policies haven't made any significant change. Like, that's lunacy. If you saw someone, I'm thinking of other than the Amish, and I don't think even the Amish technically live like they did 80 years ago, right? They have all kinds of little cheats and stuff. I don't say cheats. Amish people, I love you. You're not watching this anyway, but whatever. No shade on the Amish is what I'm trying to say. No one lives like they did 80 years ago, except in our immigration policy the same. So sorry, I got on a little bit of a tangent there. What I'm saying is put the system on trial. There we go. All right, I'm out.
Yeah, and just to tag on to what you said about the visas, how I usually explain it is, do you know people who are really upset about people who overstayed their visas or illegal immigrants who choose to ignore a speed limit on a toll road because they don't like it? The government's taking my money. Do you have people who choose to ignore, any other law that just they don't like? It impinges their sense of freedom as an American. I would say compare the motivation for doing that with the motivation of a person who, because the system is so poor, they have been forced to have their visa has expired and they haven't had a real opportunity to extend it or do anything about it, and they're like, well, I have a life here, I have friends back home, I don't have much of anything, I'm just going to stay here a little longer and see if I can find another legal pathway, and that ends up extending over time. Is what they're doing worse somehow than all the other ways in which people, break laws in this country?
Yeah. So I'm interested in this. This will be our final question, and we'll get into some final comments. Marilyn asked the question: what parts of immigration have bipartisan support? What are the things it seems like everyone is rallying around?
I would have said,
Uh-huh.
would have said asylum system reform, but then the bipartisan bill was torpedoed. So it's hard to identify what truly is, what really has support anymore.
Was that the bill that Kesiah was talking about that had been authored by Republicans and then
It was authored by a bipartisan committee in the Senate.
Yeah, that one has border dreamers, mainly that, and yeah, a lot of money goes to border, securing the border, and not. Yes, it's just relatively the best one right now. So mainly those areas.
we can only hope, I suppose, after the election is passed and it's no longer politically expedient to block the bill. Maybe it'll have new life. So I'm going to read this comment from Janelle Torres here, and then just turn it over to y'all for some final thoughts. If you have them, no pressure. You all have already shared some amazing stuff. So, but Janelle said it's intriguing because no one seems to question when someone moves from one country to another and they're wealthy. No one bats an eye when a famous celebrity relocates to another country or a wealthy business person moves to open a new business. A lot of immigration policy and sentiment is inherently biased against people because of their socioeconomic status. Yeah, and I would add to that Janelle race, right? Because again, we had quotas where the European countries always seem to get more folks in than the brown countries. So definitely socioeconomic status and race play a big part in that. Which is not great. I know that's implied in your comment as well. Well, folks, it's been a really great conversation. I appreciate it. Just want to open the floor to all of you for some final, if you have any final thoughts or some point that you didn't get to say because I was yammering on them at the Amish, anything like that. Please don't let me prevent all of our guests from getting to bask in your brilliance a bit longer.
I just wanted to thank everybody who's tuned in and maybe watches this after the fact, that you're maybe you don't know anybody personally who's going through an immigration journey, but you're here and you're wanting to find out more information and you're working on educating yourself. So I think that's really great, and you should feel like that's part of the process.
Because if I can also add something. So my mind, like you said, thinks very systematically, right? So the way I see things is, we have events, we have patterns, we have underlying structures, and we have mental models. And I think that when we think about our current system, I was talking about the events, the part that my experiential piece of this, but then there are also the structures, which I think Andy and his wife have quite a bit of experience on that. But I think that the underlying piece of that is the mental models. And when we say, what can we do? Obviously, there's something we can do about the structures, right? So that we can change the patterns and the events. But what I was trying to say when I said it comes down to power, or really, that very basic struggle, what I was trying to speak is about the mental models that inform this whole belief system. I think the Republican Party has been using this as a very strong narrative to push in a very overgeneralized and way, just to push for votes, right? So it becomes like an on and off switch that implies a lot of assumptions and things, and that's a big risk. So I think that one of the things that I would suggest is if we can kind of be aware of the way this conversation is manipulated to push for a specific narrative, and be careful because there's so many nuances to it. The second thing I would say is, Andy mentioned a couple of times, like, how would you like to be treated? And as I was in the last couple of weeks, I've been listening and reading Abraham Joshua Heschel, which is a Jewish philosopher and thinker that participated very strongly with Martin Luther King, and also advocacy for against the war in Vietnam. And one of the things that I guess another item that I would say that we can do besides working on modifying the systems is really reviewing our core values. One of the things that he says, is about humanity. We can see humans as biological beings and also as mechanical beings, and just as a humans themselves, right? So he makes that differentiation. I thought it was super interesting because when it becomes biological, it's just biological needs, a body that has needs. When you see it as a mechanical thing, it is just dynamics. And one of the examples that he was giving is that, for example, the way they were rationalizing what was going on in Vietnam, it was just a mechanical thing. It was a threat, and actually, curiously enough, it was labeled as communist, and so it's a defense against communist. And some people, even Christian people, were questioning why. I mean, does that give us the right to kill people? And they just figure out, like, well, the number of people that have died is less than the number of people that are being born. So again, just when you just dehumanize the conversation and make it into a mechanical conversation, how many people are coming into the country, how much money does that cost, how many, then it's just like you remove the human component to the equation, it just becomes a mechanic. So we fall into that trap of having a mechanic conversation about something that's supposed to be human, right? And so I think that once we bring that question, going back to Andy's question, how would you like to be treated? Abraham's question was, who do you see when you see another human? I mean, is this, and how would you treat that person? The last thing I'm going to say is, from the humans, from the biblical standpoint, I find it very interesting how we tend to see the whole Christianity, and actually Abraham was not Christian, was Jewish, and a lot of what he did was in collaboration with other faiths. But the United States, calling itself a Christian nation, how much we focus on the moral aspects of things and the sexual aspect of things, and not so much on the social justice. And one verse that was coming to mind and this afternoon is when Jesus was that was something he did not do often, but he says, a certain group of people, he says, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels." And why is he doing that? Oh, because you were watching the wrong movies, or you were doing the wrong sexual things. Actually, no, it was because I was hungry, you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me nothing to drink. So it's a very specific judgment to a very specific people that did not care for somebody else. And he says that what you do to others, what you do unto him. So I think that when we revise our core values, we can do that in the light of that. I think we can embrace the conversation, hopefully under a different light. If that makes sense.
Thank you, Caleb. Andy or Kesiah, any final words of wisdom for us?
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it, and I am every day praying for Heaven Collective, and yeah.
Thank you. Will you tell folks maybe who are not as familiar with World Relief Texas? We're going to drop your website in the chat, but how can they connect? What's the best way to get involved if they want to get involved? Just give us the pitch real quick.
The fastest way is I can connect you, Pastor JR, with Church Mobilizer in Dallas, and she's the person. Like, you can serve people ESL online class with African ladies.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so there are different ways that you can serve people. So she will guide you, and there's a volunteer coordinator. You got to go through training, and then work with you, customize with you how you can have hands-on experience with refugees and immigrants in Dallas. So yeah, I can connect her to you, Pastor JR.
That's terrific. Thank you so much. Andy, any final thoughts from you? Anything? I know we didn't even mention this live on camera, but you are running for office this season. So this is a busy and I'm sure stressful time for you. Anything you want to say just in terms of, all of us out here who are kind of trying to figure this out together?
Yeah, I would urge everyone to try to escape the tribalism of the political sphere and search your own hearts and ask yourself, who I vote for, who you vote for matters. Look beyond their party label and try to, you can look up who the offices that are relevant to you, who you'll be voting for. If you actually look at, what they say, that can really inform your vote in terms of, do they love the poor? Do they love the foreigner? Do they love justice? Do they love the common people here? I would say I don't want to overly focus on politics. I am running for the state senate as a Democrat, but I do want to pivot into just saying, the United States, unlike most countries in the world, wasn't built around a certain ethnic identity or a certain culture. It was built around a set of principles. And those principles can be adopted by anyone who chooses to do so. And in doing so, they become American. And there's no other country on earth where you can look at someone who looks completely different from you and sounds very different from you, and they could be just as American as you are, and you wouldn't be surprised about it. America is a country of principles, and when we see immigration waves, which have happened throughout our history from different coasts, different borders, different areas of the world, they bring new cultural things into the country. They bring change. They bring vitality. But guess what? Over the generations, they become part of the fabric of American culture. They're not taking over American culture. They're not destroying it. They're enriching it. And they're from the second, third, fourth generation, they think of themselves as Americans. And we should celebrate that because they are. So let's see immigrants in this light, that they are made in God's image, and they are people who are coming for multiple motivations, but who choose to stay because they identify with what it means to be American. And if they do, then we should welcome them here.
Thank you. Well, I have nothing more intelligent to add to that. I'll let that be our final words. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Whether you're tuning in live or whether you joined us later, we really appreciate it. Andy and Kesiah, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your work with World Relief Texas. And Sue and Caleb also, thank you. It's good to be in sacred conversation with you on Sunday mornings, but this was also a treat. Thank you for your insights and your wisdom as well. Be well, everyone. Of course, if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. But this has been sponsored by Haven Collective. Really glad that you were here. Thank you to World Relief Texas, and we will see you the next time we have one of these.